It's a room full of exciting game developers, right?
Yeah!
Yes! That's the one thing I love more than anything else, is the passion. It's kind of funny because that's a debate I often had with one of my bosses at another game company. It's like, what's better, professionalism or passion? Like, I can teach professionalism. I can even teach you how to code to make video games. But if you don't have the passion for it, I can't help you. So, yay! Right? Everyone can hear me all right?
Yeah.
Excellent, because I can't hear me. I mean, I can hear myself talk here, but, you know. So, let me just tell you a little bit about myself and all the crazy things I do and how I got in the industry and lots of questions that you might have, maybe some of the games that we're working on, you know, pretty much the sky's the limit, whatever you all want to know. I guess I've been in the game industry now for almost 20 years, which is kind of scary, but that's actually why all this gray looks the way it does, because as you know, games, they're fun, but they're really hard. But actually, that's something that I love, you know. I typically bounce around subjects quite a bit, so you'll have to excuse me if I get on really weird trains of thought, but that's typically how I operate. I haven't always been in the game industry. I did suffer a layoff way back in the early 90s. One of my first jobs was actually for a company called Microprose Software, and I worked with Sid Meier on Colonization Windows, Colonization Mac, and Civilization 2. And that's really how I got my start, was working for Microprose. And at the time, it's kind of interesting because back then, to become a game developer, it was really prove yourself, like write everything from scratch. Every graphics engine, you know, matrix multiplication, optimization, assembly code, sprite language. It was nuts how much we did as a wasted effort, quite honestly, compared to how we develop games today. And that's one thing I do talk a lot about. I've developed middleware. I've worked for other companies where we've created licensed engines. Fast forwarding a little bit, in early 2001, I joined Vicious Cycle Software, which is here in North Carolina. And I was still a developer at that time, and I worked on the Vicious engine, which most people haven't heard of, but we did license that out. But it's interesting looking at the changes between the early 90s and the way we develop games today. Even for myself, you know, I started, you know, my college degree was in computer science, and we didn't have a gaming concentration or any gaming courses whatsoever. It was simply learn how to do software engineering, learn how to code, you know, learn fairly good development practices, but nothing practical when it came to building games. So we always built things from scratch. And so that's how I originally got started, and then spent a couple of years working on the couple of games that I mentioned. Also one version of XCOM that was probably the least popular one, the one that was a flight simulator. We don't talk about that one anymore, though. And then shortly thereafter, finishing XCOM, not because of the failure of that product, but I did get laid off. I was actually going to be working with the Master of Magic group at Microprose, and for whatever corporate reasons, they decided to shut down that office in Texas. And that was kind of an opportunity for me to stop programming for a little while. And I left the industry for a short time, traveled overseas. I moved to England and did some work in consulting. That was probably one of the best things I'd ever done, is as a developer, is getting out of the United States. Now, congratulations, you all have done that, so well done. But something that I typically talk about, especially with the team that I have, is the appreciation for developing products for the world, and not just products for America. You know, we'll typically do a product, a game, and we'll make our development back the amount of money we'll make on sales in the US, but we profit off of the fact that we develop and launch games typically in 10 simultaneous languages, and we've culturalized it so that it's not just an American-based game that we're launching overseas. And that is completely because I had a tremendous amount of influence Or in other words, I had a lot of people beat me up really bad for being an American living in England and learning, it's not just about America. And so it's definitely an appreciation for product development that occurs and can launch anywhere in the world. And that's a tremendous value, especially today. Fast forwarding a little bit, to the company that I have now, or Sparkplug Games. We really started about 7 years ago when many of us, myself, my co-founder, and one of my main designers, we were getting burnt out. We were working on console games for a company called Vicious Cycle, again, that I mentioned earlier, and the fun wasn't there anymore. Who doesn't love working 90 hours a week? Come on, I do, sure. But there was a passion that was dying from a lot of people because they didn't see, the fun elements of why we were building games. And that's sad, getting back to the point of passion, because I've done a couple of other jobs in my career, but games have always been the most fun and the most difficult job and the least paying job. Wait a minute, that's weird. But if you're building games, it's not just about making the money. But you still have to make money to make games. And so it's interesting, in 2008, when we started this company, it was a fantastic time for the American economy. It wasn't. Probably the worst possible time to start a company, but yeah, we'll figure what the hell. A couple of us decided to start something getting back to the roots of game development, which if you look back to the early 80s or even the late 70s, and that would be 1970, 1980, people were building games with only a couple of people, small resources, small groups, doing it because they loved to do it. And that's something that I wanted to get back into. And so one of the main reasons we started this company was in order to stay in games, I was going to go crazy working for someone else. Because I'm a crazy guy. I do things that are nutty off the wall, which is part of the reason why we're working on a little license called Firefly, which I don't know if anyone's heard of that or not. And being able to do things your way because you feel so passionately about it and you know it's right, that's really the heart and soul of where we came from. And in this area on the East Coast of America, North Carolina, back in the 90s when I worked here, there were about 5 video game companies. Microprose was one, Red Storm Entertainment was another, and then there was a simulation company that started up, that was a branch off, Interactive Magic, by one of the co-founders of Microprose, and then maybe 1 or 2 other little small development shops. We didn't really have indies back then. Today, there's over 50 companies that are in this area. 40 of them are dedicated to game development. The other 10 are kind of branching between game development and serious games, or simulation space. And that's actually something that we do a fair amount of as well. So, bouncing around, getting into your own business and starting your own game development. I started in the early days writing everything in assembly in C, C++, working with Sid on colonization and civilization, and then getting into console development with Vicious Cycle. And that was still very hardcore, started using more middleware, but jumping forward to the last 5 years alone, the majority of our development that we do is based in Unity or Unreal. That's mostly by developer preference. So most of what we do commercially is built in Unity. So we became kind of a Unity shop officially 3 years ago. And it's something that I wish we'd done a lot sooner, because even our team size, when we started in 2007, we had about 12 people who started with us. We went as high as 20 people local in the office, and we were doing casual games, we were doing a lot of work for hire. We were a small studio, and we'd always had the desire to build our own products. But again, it's the balance between doing what you have to do what you want to do. And we're passionate game developers, but we still would like to be able to make some money off of what we do for a living. So it's a balance between work for hire and IP development. Unity was interesting because 2 years ago, they started the Unity Games division, which if you look on their website today, it doesn't exist anymore. But it was a great opportunity, and something that, from my experience, the reason why we actually got in with their team at Unity was business relationships. It had nothing to do with our portfolio or any of our backgrounds. My co-founder and my main design director, they have more experience in the industry than I do. But the reason why a small studio on the East Coast of North Carolina can get preferential treatment from Sony, an exclusive deal with Unity, a license to work with Fox Studios for Firefly, is not because of our track record, completely. A lot of it is just because we want it really bad. Which, this is a good thing, because that means any of you can do this. It's the passion and the drive and the motivation to get out there and do it for a living. But one of the things that's interesting, I have probably 10 local indie studios who call themselves indie. And I hesitate to really call us indie because we don't just develop for ourselves. We take on client work. It's great to be an indie developer, but it's even better to actually make a living. You have to make some money off of what you do. And that doesn't mean you have to take all the passion and love for game development out of the picture, because we love what we do. Aside from being able to chat with you wonderful people on a Sunday, earlier today I was working on one of our games because it's fun. I love being able to do it. It also happens to be Firefly, and we have a deadline coming up, and I'd love to get it out on time, but it's not because I have a producer breathing down my neck. It's great, I'm the boss now, I can tell him to go away. Well, he's not actually here today, that's funny. But it's the love for doing this, but still having the experience and professionalism to know you have to charge money for your skills. If you're really good at something, don't do it for free. And that's one of the things I tell a lot of my friends here who've started companies who have the experience as indie game developers. They're trying to do things just to put it out there for nothing and not make any money on it. And then they have to get jobs outside of the industry to continue doing what they love to do. And if we stop doing that, start focusing on the game industry as a business does not have to be boring. I've fortunately found a way to stay in business for the last 7 years, even as crazy as this industry's become. It's wonderful that more and more people are playing games now than ever before. But it's also more difficult because you talk to general consumers who are playing on cell phones, and a lot of them don't understand that games used to cost money. I know, it's astonishing. What do you mean I don't get to play this game for free? Everything else is free. And we struggled with that for a long time as a small company. We had a lot of work-for-hire deals with larger companies who were pushing us in the direction of releasing games in a free-to-play model. And we were horrible at building those. We could not build free-to-play games very well because we wanted to focus on what we did very well, which was traditional game design and quality development. And so we stopped doing it. We stopped developing a lot of our products with the free-to-play focus and moved back to they're premium-priced games. But they're not premium-priced $60 games. They're reasonably priced digital products. There's a game that we're finishing up now in conjunction with Firefly that's called Mech Runner, which is one of the first IPs that we've developed that we haven't sold to a publisher. A lot of our products We've done 55, 56 games. Some of them were private products that were sold to a publisher, like Big Fish Games, Atari, Namco, and they either rebranded them or released them under that name, but it was their product. This is one of the first times where we've been in a position to take our own game and decide what we want to do with it. And that means, building relationships with companies like Sony, Microsoft, Nintendo, or even Alienware, doing distribution deals to get preferential placement with marketing dollars. We don't necessarily want development funding anymore, but we'd love to get money from marketing because we don't know how to market our own products. We love building games, but marketing, that's another crazy voodoo science that no one knows how to do. So, last area I'll touch on, and then I'm sure everyone has a tremendous number of questions, right? Because I can keep talking for ages. Last year, we signed a deal to do a game based on Firefly, the series from over 10 years ago. And it's interesting because there's a very passionate crowd that follows that. I don't know if any of you have ever watched the series. Yes! Woohoo! Okay! Brown coats unite. Everyone, yes! Come on! Get crazy. That's exactly how I feel. It was funny because I've told a couple different versions of the story, but I'll tell you the true version of the story, of how we actually got the license. So, a very good friend of mine who used to run part of the legal department at Namco, he and I got to be friends when we were doing a 30th anniversary Pac-Man game, which we did mainly at a loss. They paid us a little bit of money to do a version of a Pac-Man game on mobile phones, and they didn't give us a lot, but it was just enough to really cover the engineering cost. Art costs, we had to cover all that. There weren't many art changes. And if you ever have to deal with Namco and Pac-Man, you have to deal with the Pac-Man Council in Japan. That only meets like once a month. And if you get one pixel wrong, you're off until next month. So we were delayed a couple months because we missed a few pixels. But they are literally that nitpicky, which I can respect. It's frustrating at the time as a developer when you're trying to ship a product. But if someone is that passionate about their brand, like Firefly, then I can understand the attention to detail. So we really did that because I wanted to be able to say that we'd done something with an iconic figure in the game industry. Pac-Man, Mario, Zelda, these are brands that even non-gamers can recognize. And so we did that consciously, knowing we wouldn't make any money. But in addition to the ability to attach our portfolio to a brand that was recognized, I also got to know, again, a lot of people who ran the business at Namco. And one of these individuals eventually left Namco and became the director of consumer products at NBC. And so in doing that, NBC, as you know or maybe don't know, they actually were the ones who did the Serenity movie. So Fox owns Firefly, but NBC Universal owns Serenity, which there's a whole other set of headaches for that one. But again, playing nicely, don't ever burn your bridges. You never know when someone might tap you and say, hey, I remember the great job you did and how much you helped us out. I'd like to make an introduction to someone. And so it just so happened that happened for me in meeting someone who had been doing consumer collectible products for Firefly since the show had come out, and was pretty much the main source and the most well-versed, no pun intended, person who knew the Firefly brand, and that was Quantum Mechanics. And they had a very close relationship with NBC and with a friend of mine who was there. And so they got to chatting, and they were thinking, hey, it'd be great if someone built a video game based on Firefly, because no one's ever done it, officially, legally, with the blessing of Fox. And so, through a set of introductions and a massive NDA, I had a chance to chat with this individual, and they were basically looking for guidance in how to build a game. And I had no idea what the license was at the time, but they just wanted to meet and chat and understand our development process and what drove us. Kind of like I'm talking to you now, what makes us tick. And we're a business, so we like to make money to stay in business, but we're passionate and we want to do things that we love to do. And that really rang true with this individual who was in charge of the license. And so they asked me, it's like, have you ever heard of Firefly? It's like, well, what insane individual has not heard of Firefly? Hopefully no one there is an insane individual. Everyone's saying, right? No, I see someone nodding. Yeah, better be yes, right? And then it's funny because the game discussion started in a much smaller scale. And it was kind of our design director's hopes that from the initial conversations, just getting them interested in working with us to bring something Firefly related to consumers, we could build something larger. And we ended up starting small intentionally because we didn't want to scare the license owner, who Fox, by the way, they've been fantastic to work with. You know, they pretty much give us any support we need. And eventually, our biggest concern was don't call it an MMO, because we're not doing an MMO. It's not on the MMO scale. That got blown out of proportion, so now we're sort of, kind of, not really, but a little bit doing an MMO because it's social. And so it's been tough for us because we didn't want anyone to know about it, because no one had really heard of us before then. And then Fox wanted to make the announcement, so we went to Comic-Con last year in San Diego, had a little trailer, and the crowd went wild. And then we're like, oh crap, they all know who we are now. We need to go back and hide so we can finish the game. And at that time, we didn't have the actors, so none of the original actors had signed on. Over the course of the year, as we were developing, still very much the same game that we're doing now, we had an opportunity to meet Andrea Romano, who works with a tremendous number of actors in Hollywood. She's a fantastic person, and she was able to secure the rights, the actors, and get them interested. And it's been kind of vindicating to us because all of them in the studio, when they've been recording the story that we've written, have loved it. You know, we've started recording or started putting out some of the interviews that we've had with all of these actors, and they had a great time. You know, they loved kind of what we created that still ties their characters in the verse with the player, but allows fans to witness something beyond the original show. There's never going to be a series 2, I'm sorry. But we really feel like, you know, this game could become series 2 and 3 and 4 and so on. So it's still it's amazing to me thinking about it every time we have a conversation each week, you know, with the West Coast operations, you know, how much is going into this and how powerful the game can be in keeping the characters and the story alive. And again, feeding back into the passion. I mean, it's a dream project, and I don't think a large company could actually do it justice. It really needs to be done by a team which is kind of run the way the Big Damn Heroes run in the show. Now, we don't kick people in engine intakes that often. You know, I did say my producer's not here anymore, and that's part of the reason why, but we like to have a lot of fun with it. And so, you know, getting back to me eventually shutting up so you guys can ask me something. You know, it's fun. Again, game development, you gotta love it because it's one of the hardest jobs in the world. And it's not something, this is something I slightly disagree with a lot of the democratization of game development that a lot of companies are touting with engines. You can have the best tools in the world. It doesn't make the job of building fun any easier. You still have to build it, and you still have to do, you know, a schedule that I estimate is going to take a couple of weeks, usually turns into a couple of months. Because if it's not fun when you're done with it, then you're not done. So, let me stop, pause, drink a little tea, and ask questions. Hello.
Hello, sir. I've seen that you've been working for the past 16 years, and we just started the project right now. You said you didn't want it to call your program an MMO because it's kind of a tricky model to follow. So what's your output on esports right now? What is your output on actual models that could turn on into esport games, such as MOBAs, for example?
That's interesting. That's an interesting question. So part of the reason why we don't call it an MMO, and one of the things that we've kind of returned to, if someone came to us and said, here's a great free-to-play idea that we have, and we'd like to develop it with you, I would probably say no, we won't do it. And it's fantastic being able to say no to something. The first couple of years, we'd say yes to everything. Oh yeah, we'll do that. Floppy birds? Yeah, bring it on, we'll do it. Not anymore. I'll tell you though, what's really interesting, the reason why we've changed is I've seen, through the experiences I've watched other people have developing products for a mass market audience. MMO may be similar in this regard. As a small studio, if I don't want to spend a tremendous amount of money in monetization or marketing, user acquisition, if I have a partner who could do that, great. But if it's something we're doing ourselves, I would much prefer to have a vast audience of consumers that I've identified, that I know I have 50,000, maybe 100,000 people who I know would love to play this game. Then that's what I'll target. Doing a game at a premium price point, $10 to $20, we could throw the math together quickly, but if you have 50 to 100,000 people, those types of games are profitable. And the only reason why I can say that is because I'm not owned by Electronic Arts or THQ, former THQ. So if it's a small business opportunity, if it's a product that we're managing ourselves, I'll identify the consumer audience that I want to target and just do that. And I certainly could make more if I wanted to go after 10 million people and somehow acquire those users, but in some ways it's more difficult in the long term, because one thing that has happened with a consumer model where games and products are easily disposable within a couple of minutes is you don't have the user attachment, and we're much more interested to engage and retain a fan base that is very passionately behind a product or a brand that we've built, than trying to figure out how to keep being the flavor of the month. So we're horrible if it comes to recommending type spaces. That's kind of a strange answer, but it's also, we know what we're good at. And I know, I enjoy building something and, charging a reasonable amount, knowing that someone is going to have a tremendous amount of fun playing that. We're doing that now with our IP called Mech Runner. We're doing that with Firefly. We have been very honest about, we're developing this game for the fans of the brand. If gamers want to play it too, we'll welcome them. But we're doing this for fans first and foremost. So it's an identification of your consumers. So if you were going to try to figure out if esports would work for you, the question for you would be, how well do you know how to engage with that consumer? Because I don't. Does that answer it, I hope?
It does.
Excellent.
Just to go back to the question, what's your opinion
Sure.
on other models, such as MOBA, Multiplayer Online Battle Arena?
Yes.
What's your opinion on that?
I think, again, it's kind of the thing, it's kind of the same answer. There is an audience who wants to play that. Just like there's an audience for horror movies. Just like there's an audience for Flappy Bird games. So, if you are going to do that, it's learn how to engage with that audience. The fortunate thing is there are a tremendous number of games that already have that model in place. And so this does kind of tie to why I'm trying to avoid having Firefly be referred to as an MMO. Because we're not as Blizzard. Not even the size and scale, but the type of experience that we're actually trying to allow players to engage with. It's not a competitive, like a violent competitive game where you potentially could outdo another player. We wanted to make sure, because a lot of Firefly fans are not gamers, that the experience we gave them was the ability to interact with other captains in the verse. And that's the breadth of an MMO, but not a asynchronous live online combat. I'm going to kill your captain, you're going to lose. Because that would make people sad, and we don't like making people sad. Now, you can definitely get reputation and do better than others, but it's a balanced system that'll be a safe environment. I hesitate to call, my kids make me play Clash of Clans with them. I'd never spend money on it, but they love to play it. And so I like to watch them play, and I watch the strategies they use, and I laugh. But the interesting thing that I think they do very well now is if you have any type of player attack you and they win, you automatically get a certain level of protection. So you can't constantly be getting completely destroyed. And I think that's a good balance. I don't think that was originally in the first version of the game, but it's something that the developers saw, we don't want to frustrate players. And again, understand your consumers or your audience. So hopefully we'll do the same thing. Not smash the plans, that would be bad.
Okay, John?
Yes.
We have time for like 1 or 2 more questions. That's okay?
Wow, I talked a lot.
¿Alguna pregunta? No. Pueden preguntar en español si quieren traductor. No? No? Okay. So you can keep talking, I guess, for 10 minutes. No more questions. Hello?
Oh, yeah, I'm still here.
Okay, so
I'm stretching too.
we have no more questions currently, so you can keep talking for like 10 minutes if you want.
Sure. Yeah. I can go on for hours. They're like, oh no, please don't. Rough show of hands, how many of you are currently working for small studios now in the game industry? Like less than 10 people?
Yeah.
So something interesting that I've been talking to a lot of small studios in this area about, again, is the diversification of using your skills for good. Use them for good. Always use them for good. But it's interesting to me how few game studios will use the talents, user interface design, engaging content, multi-platform development, and you don't use it for anything except for games. And what's interesting is there is actually a tremendous and much bigger market for simulations, e-learning, marketing products that instructional design firms who don't know how to make video games, they make billions of dollars doing this. And so one of the ways that I can sit here and say, we're building our own games as well, and I'm not terribly worried about how many they sell. We diversify. We do contract work for large companies looking for that level of fun engagement. It used to be called serious games, but they're usually not that serious. But game companies, actually, there's a tremendous opportunity to make enough money to allow you that element of doing what you want to do by doing what you have to do. And the have to do is you have to make something that provides a revenue stream. If you can generate that revenue stream, you can have a tremendous amount of fun building whatever you want. And it doesn't have to be free to play with 10 million users to build a monetization system that's going to make you money. You know, it could be a product that you simply enjoy doing. And so it's kind of this pseudo indie developer mentality where you're building it for the passion, but you're being supported in using your skills, making money as a game developer, but not having to fight the App Store charts or Steam Greenlight. You know, you don't have any of those stresses. You know, you use your development and you develop, you know, for example, there was a product we did for a little company called IBM. You may have heard of them. They kind of exist all around the place. And they're boring. Oh my gosh, they're boring as can be. And that was the wonderful thing. They were so boring that even giving them a teeny tiny bit of fun was enough for them to go, yes, we love it. Here's lots and lots of bags of money. Well, they don't quite operate like that. But that's what it was in my head. I was thinking that. But taking your skills and using that, there are opportunities where you can make good money. It's not any more difficult. In many cases, it's easier than building a game. And that allows you to still focus your efforts in building games. So I would encourage you, you know, if you're thinking of ways to at least stabilize some of the chaos that is game development, and make a company that persists so that you can keep building fun games, you know, that's an area to look at. Now, the unfortunate thing is most people outside of the industry don't understand the language of game development. So you need to have a very strong converse with non-gamers, with companies. I don't, but if I go give a presentation to companies, I typically do wear a suit. Now, normally I'm dressed in a t-shirt, and that's the way I like to operate, except when I'm going to do business with companies, and then you have to change your modes a little bit. But again, it's astonishing to me how few companies take advantage of this, because we've made a very good amount of money that allows us to do the things that we want to do just by engaging with some clients. So that's one opportunity. The other thing too is, does anyone use Unity or any other middleware? Unreal, Unity, Flash? What's another good one? XNA Studio. Oh wait, no, Microsoft pulled that one. Never mind. Again, leveraging the tools that we have. It's, you know, one of the things I was doing here before we started chatting is a little children's educational game. And there's a company that could not figure out how to make this game work between a tablet and a smartphone and the PC. It's like, well, build it in Unity. Like, well, what's Unity? Like, oh, we're going to have fun. This is good. Yeah. So again, even those skills, I mean, you all are working with tools that allow you and give you the power to deploy to multiple platforms. You know, don't minimize the value of what that is. And also, if you can help it, and you know, the other thing in Firefly, give users the opportunity to play anywhere they are. So if you're on a phone, you know, riding on a bus or driving your car, no, never drive your car and do your phone, don't do that at the same time. Unless you're not driving, then you can do it. And then you know, you get home or you get to the office and you actually can play games in the office. We call it research, but you know, you do that in the office. It's wonderful if you're able to allow a player the ability to move with the device, wherever they are. And Google is doing that between Android, and Apple is doing it between Game Center, and then Steam is doing it with Steam. But none of them are doing it between each other, not yet. And so there are other platforms, you know, that we use, because we don't like writing web software. That's boring. Games are fun. Web software, not fun. So leveraging, again, middleware in the cloud, which we used to call the internet, which were mainframes before that. I don't know. I can't keep going on this. But, you know, again, focus what you want to do. You know, be a content developer if you want to build content. Don't re-architect databases, because people have done it so much better than we can. You know, even Oracle's better. Well, maybe not Oracle, but, you know. Again, kind of getting back, that's something that we did early on. We wrote everything from scratch. And that's such a waste. Build great games, but focus on just the game. Unless you want to build engines, in which case, why are you listening to me? I mean, I build games.
Sorry, John.
Are you good?
Yeah, we're actually out of time. I'm really sorry about that.
No, that's cool.
Okay, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Awesome. Nice. Good talking to you all.